Welcome into Citizen Sports Talk. Kaden Reinhard here with Jacob Smith. And this week we got a large array of action kind of going back and forth between Carroll County and Floyd County this week. We'll get it started on Monday, March 30th. We'll go down to Hillsville for Carroll County softball action where they hosted Tazewell. The Cavaliers took that contest 14-2. You know, that Carroll County offense, we've seen some big games from them even in their losses. You know, going back to their opening contest against Pulaski, they lost 17-9, but you know, those 9 runs and a loss, that's still impressive. The offense shined once again against Tazewell. We'll get kind of into their game later in the week that was a little bit more lower scoring, but 14-2, a 12-run victory in softball on a diamond, it's always pretty great.
Absolutely, and what a way to bounce back for the Lady Cavaliers off of the slaughter loss last Friday at home against Pulaski County, 11-0, the score there. So being able to pick up their second win of the season, both their wins have been by very large margins, Kaden. And speaking of another team that won by a large margin on Monday, the Lady Buff softball team at home against Narrows. They won 22-1 in Narrows the first time, the Lady Buffs over the Lady Green Wave. 15-2 was the score the second time around. The Lady Buffs are 4-0 this season and are averaging over 15 runs per game, or right around 15 runs per game. You're talking about some of the offense for the Lady Cavaliers. Definitely can say the same thing, if not even higher remarks for the Lady Buffs offense.
You can, and that's a big reason that we're talking about the Buffaloes being 4-0 right now as well. That offense is off the charts for the Buffaloes.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we're talking about all this high-powered offense, 14 runs for the Cavaliers, 15 runs for the Buffaloes. Going on to Tuesday's action, we'll stay in Floyd for a little bit of soccer action, Floyd County versus Auburn. 0-0, the tie there. So just a total kind of switch of the script there. But you referenced the Carroll County slaughter loss last week. Same kind of goes for the Floyd County Buffaloes soccer team last week. No slaughter rule in soccer, but they did lose 6-0 to Auburn last week. This week able to force that 0-0 tie, so that defensive shift definitely changed it around against the Eagles. Buffaloes moved to 2-1-1 after the contest against Auburn this week.
Absolutely. Like you said, pretty much a 6-goal swing, if you will. Obviously being able to have this game at Floyd probably helped a little bit in turning the momentum slightly in Floyd County's direction. But a Floyd County team that had to travel on Tuesday, Kaden, the baseball team having to travel to Bassett, lost in their season opener against the Bengals 9-6 at home. A little bit lower scoring this time around. 2-1 was the final. It ended a 3-game winning streak that the Buffaloes had all of last week against Pulaski, Patrick, and Galax. So they dropped to 3-2 with the loss on Tuesday to wrap up the action Tuesday.
Yeah, it was an exciting matchup there in Bassett. If you're a fan of the pitchers, that was definitely their matchup going, as you know, David Cook threw that complete game against the Buffaloes. But then on to Wednesday's action, back into Carroll County for the Lady Cavaliers softball action. Just referenced it just a second ago. They were 2-2 heading into the midweek contest against Chilhowie, but they did lose 7-3. A little bit lower scoring than what the Lady Cavaliers have been able to put up. Just, you know, falling 4 runs short of the victory there against Chilhowie.
Absolutely. One of the, like you said, one of the lower scoring contests we've seen there. Transitioning to some Floyd County action, but first, now I'm looking at my notes. A game that was supposed to be scheduled Wednesday for Carroll County, or a match, I should say, that's been rescheduled. The girls' soccer against the Lady Cougars rescheduled to May 18th. I believe that was one of the few reschedules due to the forecast that hit Wednesday evening. And a Floyd County reschedule, Lady Buff softball at Fort Chiswell has not been rescheduled yet. We'll see when and if that gets put back on the schedule. But looking at the Floyd County action that did pan out on Wednesday, Girls soccer traveled to Giles Caden, lost 3-0, and they are 0-3 to start the season. We've talked about it a couple times already, the return of the Lady Buff soccer program this year, and just kind of still trying to get things figured out.
Yeah, definitely. It's the soccer program as a whole in Floyd County has honestly been on shaky grounds for as long as I can kind of remember, at least, over 5 years now for both the boys and the girls, like I said. So just seeing finally that we are able to have boys and girls team. I know they even tried a co-ed team one year. So just the return, of Floyd County girls soccer that's a step already in the right direction.
Absolutely. And maybe not a step in the right direction. You're looking at your notes. I'm looking at my notes. The baseball game against Rappahannock for the Buffaloes, a 13-3 loss, back-to-back losses. However, a little trying to Band-Aid the wound, I guess. Rappahannock did also put up 30 runs in their previous game before the contest Wednesday, so at least you didn't give up 30 runs, instead just 13. Rappahannock's a good team. That's pretty much all I can say about that. And unfortunately for the Buffaloes, back-to-back losses against two really great teams. Bassett has a chance to go far in Class 3. I think Rappahannock has a chance to maybe win it all in Class 1. And let's wrap this week up. A shorter week, obviously Good Friday. No school, no activities. So wrapping up the week with Thursday's action.
Yeah, so in Thursday's action, we'll head right back down 221 into Hillsville again for Carroll County boys soccer, picking up their first victory of the season over the Patrick County Cougars. It was a brutal one, a 5-1 kind of slaughter for the Cavaliers, but I will say it was against the Cougars team who has struggled themselves this year. That moves them to 0-6 on the year, and in their 6 contests, they've been outscored 28-5. So for the Cavaliers, a great momentum-building game, but finally picking up that first victory after 4 games. So see if you can build off after that.
Absolutely. Sometimes the way it works out is just building that momentum and kind of breaking through there. I remember seeing it with like the Lady Buffs last year. Took them a little bit. For basketball, I should say, to be a little bit more specific on which sport, had, I believe, 0-7 start. Once they finally got that first win, that monkey off their back, able to pick up a couple district games, win majority of them actually. But going back on course with the action this week, talking about getting on the right track for boys soccer, can't really say the same about softball and baseball for the Carroll County Cavaliers. Looking at softball first, Caden, a 13-6 loss in Stewart. The Cavaliers making the trip down 58 to Stewart. That's the Lady Cavaliers' second straight loss. They're starting Three Rivers play 0-1. And for the baseball team, a little bit closer of a contest. We talked about Patrick County last week. At least baseball, to be specific, the 1-0 loss here. It took a walk-off to have that happen against the Buffaloes, but the Cougars going to come away with a 1-0 win this time around, to kind of changing their fate in those lower-scoring games. Carroll County starting district play in the Three Rivers, also 0-1.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, both softball and baseball starting the Three Rivers play. And, for baseball, it's one of those games you really just have to take the positives from. Defensively, that Patrick County Cougars team, that's a respected team. Only giving up 1 run, that's kind of where I think your mentality has to be. You look at that, and then you build on that in the next game.
Absolutely. And looking back at last week, talking about, we referenced it, Colton's conversation with Coach Miller, talking about Patrick County for baseball, to be specific. The Kings of the Three Rivers was the quote that we referenced from Coach Miller, and to put up that close of a performance after some of the struggles already this year for Carroll County. Definitely, obviously not coming away with a win, but definitely a potential building block down the stretch towards the back half of the season.
Definitely, and that's what you need to build onto, especially once you get into district play this time of year. That's when these games kind of really become the most important. You try to play as good of competition as you can leading up to this. You see it with the Buffaloes. They're going out of their way to play Bassett, play these good 1A teams like Rappahannock.
Absolutely. Looking ahead to next week, Kaden, obviously limited action based on what we talked about beforehand, but tell us what's in store for the second week of April.
Yeah, it is, like you just mentioned, kind of an odd week if you look at it from our standpoint with the way it lines up for the Cavaliers and the Buffaloes. We'll start in Carroll County. Honestly, if you start that way, it goes pretty chronologically because they open up their week on Monday. Boys junior varsity and varsity soccer head up to Roanoke to take on Glenver, as well as girls varsity soccer hosts Glenver in Carroll County. And then wrapping up Monday for the Cavaliers will be boys varsity tennis, also takes the trip up to Glenver there. Then on Tuesday for the Cavaliers, it'll be softball, junior varsity, and varsity, once again taking up the trip to take on the Highlanders there in Salem, while boys tennis travels to Grayson for their match there. Then ending contests on Tuesday for the Cavaliers will be varsity baseball. They get to host the Highlanders in Hillsville on Tuesday. Then wrapping up the Cavaliers' short week on Wednesday will be a boys and girls track meet all the way down at the edge of Virginia in Abington to round out their week. Cavaliers, their week ends on Wednesday. Buffalo's week starts on Wednesday as it lines up. So on the 8th for them, middle school boys soccer heads down to George Wythe for their matchup there, as well as middle school baseball and softball head to Blacksburg for their respective contests there against the Bruins. Then on the 9th, Thursday, varsity boys tennis match they'll host Patrick Henry here in Floyd for the only matchup on Thursday. Then rounding out the week for the Buffaloes on Friday, April 10th, will be boys junior varsity soccer heading to George Wythe there, as well as varsity softball hosting Radford here in Floyd, rounding out the week.
Definitely busy week as always. A lot less action than usual, but definitely can't say it's not busy. Carroll County going to ramp up their district play even further, both for baseball and softball to be specifically, as well as soccer, taking on that Glenver series Monday and Tuesday. And then noticeably on that schedule, the lack of Buffaloes baseball, the way the schedule played out. So it'll be interesting to see how that week off next week will play out. I know that Carroll County matchup with the Buffaloes for baseball and softball is on the calendar for April 14th, and I think that's the next game they have left or on the schedule. So it'd be interesting to see how the Buffaloes play with over a week off.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's baseball's not often a sport where you talk about a bye week, but it somehow worked that way for baseball. You honestly want to stay in that swing. You stay hot. You stack up those games right after each other. So it'll definitely be a different look for the Buffaloes. It's almost like a mid-season restart for them.
Well, we've talked about a mid-season restart as of recent months, given the weather that occurred towards the end of the basketball season, and it kind of worked out for the boys basketball team for the Buffaloes. So maybe it was needed for the baseball team too.
Definitely, and it honestly lines up great with the way district season will start. It kind of helped the Buffaloes, like you said, propel a late season surge into district play. So we'll see if the Buffaloes can start with the surge maybe.
Absolutely. But wrapping up this week's action and recap, Jacob Smith and Kaden Reinhard, thank you for watching Citizen Sports Talk. We'll see you next week.